want to say welcome to all the people who are listening in and watching this video. Today we're going to be discussing the United States Constitution, and I promise it will not be a boring history lesson. Those who like history, of course, might be disappointed, but it's not going to be just a history lesson. It's an overview. I want to say welcome to all the people who are listening in and watching this video. Today we're going to be discussing the United States Constitution, and I promise it will not be a boring history lesson. Those who like history, of course, might be disappointed, but it's not going to be just a history lesson. It's an overview. I want to say welcome to all the people who are listening in and watching this video. Today we're going to be discussing the United States Constitution, and I promise it will not be a boring history lesson. Those who like history, of course, might be disappointed, and I am, as a quick introduction about me, is I am a retired judge, Honorable Eileen Nadelson. RET stands for retired, by the way, and I now am counseling lawyers in my retirement. I counsel lawyers on how to be better advocates at court or in conference. That's what I do as my job. But what I do believe in is that the people of the country should really know who we are and how we began and what our structure is in our government. First, let me begin that we are the only, this is important, we are the only nation on the planet that has a constitution written from the ground up. In other words, the people. Most other constitutions or about human rights resolutions or whatever throughout the globe come from the monarchy. In other words, everybody began as a monarch. We were always either one or the other. You're on some kind of empire. And when people got a little bit disappointed or frustrated or disoriented, the monarch would say, "Uh-oh, there's rumbling going on." So they gave them some human rights resolutions, which came down from the monarchy. It was not written by the public. It was coming down from the people in power. We're the only ones on this nation, on this globe, that actually wrote our own constitution. That's what sets us apart. That's what gave us all that reputation. That's why people wanted to come here. And this is a place of real freedom. That's where we got our reputation of freedom. It's because we were the first. And this is the preamble. When the founders came together, a little background, this is a little history. The first place that got settled in the United States was in Virginia, Jamestown, Virginia. That was in 1607. This is a little history. So we came from the British Empire. New York got settled a little bit later, about 15 years later, the Dutch came. So if you're a New Yorker, you know that we sort of evolved from the Dutch. But most of this country, it was under the rule of the British Empire. And it took 170 years, it's like almost 200 years later, until the 1776 revolution. It didn't happen overnight that we got independence. But around in the late 1770s, people started to feel oppressed and a little bit disappointed in what was going on with the British Empire. They were being affronted, they were being restrained. So a lot of rumblings were going on, and there were some little fights going on, little wars going on. And about 1775, it hit the wall, and we actually came to war. We actually came to war in 1776. That's when the country said, "We've had enough of you. We're not doing this with you and the British anymore. We want our independence. Go home. Don't bother us. Get out of our place." 1776 was the Declaration of Independence, which happened from the people in this country. All right. Then we had the war. The war lasted about 5 years. It was 1781. We were at war until 1781, and the war stopped. We won, so to speak. We won. We are now 1781. We have nobody governing us. The British are not in power anymore. We are now faced with some of our founders: Madison, Jefferson, Franklin, Adams, Hamilton, all those great names that some of you may have heard of in school. These are the people who are now living in the country in the late 1700s, 1780s. They say, okay, what do we do now? We need a structure of government. First thing, so they had a convention. They all met at this convention, and they put their heads together and said, okay, what kind of government do we want? And this is when the preamble this thinking about how we're going to do this. They thought about, well, should we call it the states constitution? They bandied some words, and the first thing that came, not the first, after several ideas, they decided it's got to be from the people. This, my viewers, is what you need to know about the Constitution of the United States. It's called the preamble, which sets the tone for the Constitution. And it says, I'm going to read it because it's important. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. That is the preamble of our Constitution. Next slide. So they started with what kind of government? Don't pay attention to the slide just yet, but they decided, how are we going to do this? The plan was, we have to have something that will keep mankind, at that time man was governing, from taking over power. So they set up 3 branches of government. They were going to have a legislative branch, an executive branch, and a judicial branch. And each one of those branches was going to be totally independent. One could not tell the other what to do, but one could oversee what the other one was doing. And this is how we set up the government. 3 separate branches, each one overseeing the other, each one independent. Okay? The first one they set up was the legislative branch. Next slide. Second one they set up was the executive branch. Next slide. Next thing they set up was the judicial branch. There are your 3 branches. Next slide. First article. Article 1 is your legislative branch. Notice in bold print, all legislative powers. All legislative, not some, not the majority, not a few, not what they think should be. All legislative powers are vested in the Congress. They are the only branch, or it is the only branch, that can make the rules and statutes. The only branch, independent of anybody else. Nobody else gets to make any rules except the Congress. And this consists of a Senate and a House of Representatives. And of course, I'm giving you an overview, but in this Article 1, which is pretty extensive, interesting how extensive they did make it, our founders, they set up how they're elected, where they come from, what the percentages shall be, what their duties should be. This is a very extensive article for the legislative branch, and it's all about the Congress making the rules, right? Let's go to the next slide. The second branch, Article 2, this is Article 2, is the executive branch. This is about the president. This is the one that's a little less extensive. It's pretty open and vague. It doesn't say, it just says the executive power is vested in the president, and he has a vice president. And at that time, it's always been 4 years, but at that time it was only 1 term. Now a president can be 2 terms. So this is the one that said the president has the executive power. What that actually means is that the Congress makes the rules and the regulations. The president is the one to enforce and make sure that they're implemented. So the Congress sets up the Department of Education. The Congress sets up the Internal Affairs. The Congress sets up the Pentagon. The Congress sets up the environment. The Congress sets up this is all Congress. Nobody but the Congress sets up those agencies. The president is in charge of making sure each one of those agencies implement and enforce the rules that Congress set up. So he is responsible to make sure that they do their jobs. That's pretty much. What happened is that the president, over the years, and we see it now, and it happened before our time, it'll probably happen after our time, but every person that became president decided to say, well, I can do this because it needs to be done. And they started to make executive orders. This is not the first time it happened. Every generation did this. So they made it executive orders. In this article too, by the way, for the viewers, there is a section. How do you know what the president's supposed to do? It says the president is allowed in an emergency or in wartime or in drastic circumstances, the president can actually make rules on his own. That's when he can stand on his own. He can make a unitary regulation. That meant, like, let's say if I can explain it, wartime. Wartime, he needs to be consented by the Congress, so he can't do it on his own. But once he gets consent of the Congress, we have to go to war to fight this country. That's when he becomes commander in chief. Now he can make unitary regulations. He can decide where we attack, when we attack, what kind of weapons we want to produce. This is the president in power. They actually gave him that unitary power under wartime. The other times he can do it is when in drastic situations, like an earthquake. Picture an earthquake, picture a cyclone, the entire state or the area of the state is destroyed. The president can now make executive orders on what supplies. Maybe the military will go in and help reconstruct. Who's going to, try to make it? He may give orders to the people of the state on rebuilding. He's in charge of that in drastic situations. So the president can do it under those circumstances. These are the only times. This is where it mentions that. It actually mentions that. So this is what happens under drastic situations. Every president took what they thought was an emergency measure. Roosevelt did it, Truman did it, Nixon did it, Clinton did it. These may be before some of your times. Every president did it. They happened before our time. It's happening in our time now, probably too extensive, some of you may think, and it's going to happen after our time. The point is, he's not supposed to be doing any of this unitary executive orders unless it is an emergency. So, how do you stop it? You have to bring an action against the president, or you have to bring an action against that executive order. That is the only time you can stop it. Otherwise, if you don't, and when I say you, I mean you folks, you're the people, you're the ones that have to do it. So somebody, either the agency has to do it, or some organization is going to do it, or some person is going to do it. I don't know. But you have to bring an action to get in the way of the president, and then it will go to the judicial branch. We'll get to that in a minute. Otherwise, if you don't do it, you, the public, you, the people, it's going to stay in place. It stays in place. So if there's no action on the part of the people, there's no stopping. And we have stopped it in the years. President Truman, I think, tried to take over a steel mill. He thought it was important during the Korean War that he control the production of the weapons. So he took over the steel mill. There was an action against him, and they held that was unconstitutional. It was not an emergency to take over a company. That's not an emergency. All right. So that was stopped. Every president's tried it. Nixon tried it. Clinton tried it. It's all one way or another. Either people stand up and stop it, or they don't. And who stops it? The people. All right. So that's Article 2, the executive branch, which contains the president. All right. Let's go to the next. Article 3. This is the judicial branch, the third branch. This is the one where your Supreme Court is in place and all the other courts underneath it, your state courts, your regular courts, you go to civil court, you go to Supreme Court, whatever state sets up a court. This is all part of the judicial branch. And that was established in the Constitution. This is written in the Constitution. This is where you set up the court power. And people are running around saying, well, how come the justices aren't stopping what's going on? These are people who don't like what's going on. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't. I don't want to take a partisan position here. But if you are complaining about it, they're saying, why aren't they doing something about this? Why are the Supreme Court justices not stopping this? Because they can't unless there's a case. It has to be on the desk of the Supreme Court. On the desk. They cannot, this is an independent branch, has no power unless there's a ready case. So it might be in the lower courts, which, if you do want to bring a case, it's going to go to your state or it's going to go to your federal court in the state. That's your lower court. Has to get through that. Then if it's appealed, it has to go to the next level of that federal court. It's not, and it may or may not come to the Supreme Court at all. If it doesn't come to the Supreme Court, then they are not able to do anything about it. You got to come to grips with that. This is how it's written in the Constitution. So stop complaining about the justices not taking charge. If it does come to them, they are now taking charge. They are allowed to review it. The only thing that they could do is declare the action constitutional or not. And sometimes they declare it a way you don't like it. I understand that happens. And that's something, but what do you do if you don't like what the judicial power does? Guess where it goes? It goes back, if you want it, it goes back to the Congress. They have to make another regulation. It's still you in charge. We, the people, are in charge of the Congress. If you don't like something, you're either going to stop what's happening or you're going to go to your Congress and say, I don't like what's happening, do something else. If you don't go to your Congress, again, it's on your back. I do this because I want the public to know that we are the people. We are the government. There is nobody else. We're not like the foreign countries out there. They have a monarchy or have, a substitute kind of constitution. We are the only people that can do the regulation of this country. The only ones. We are the people. Your job is to either go to your congressman or bring a case so it gets to the judiciary or mostly it's the Congress, because if you don't like what the president's doing, that also goes to Congress or a case, one or the other. That's the only people who can do what has to be done here. And everybody's sitting out there pretending like, well, I don't know who's going to do this. Who's going to do this? Wake me up. Wake me up when you find somebody who's going to do this. Guess what, folks? It's you or nobody. We are the people. And that is something that is really, it's daunting. It's hard to come to grips with that. I understand that. But that's the Constitution of the United States. And once you get it, you probably can come to grips with it. I'm sure you can. Once you get it, you'll come to grips with it. You just need to know who you are. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so this is now the Constitution of the United States. I'm going to get into the Bill of Rights and tell you why. When the Constitution was done, and it was finally signed off in 1787, so they met in convention in 1781. Again, things don't happen overnight, but it was not signed off until 1787. And that's when, in the Constitution, it also says you have to get it ratified by the states. The states have to agree to it. So they went to the states, and the states said, no, we're not signing off on this Constitution because we don't trust it. We don't think it's going to be able to stop a dictator or a monarchy. The only time that we're going to come to grips, if you want us to sign it, is you have to give us a guarantee of our own personal rights, which is what they're accustomed to by living on the monarchs. The monarchs gave them their human rights. They said, we want our own human rights document. Otherwise, we're not signing off on this. So guess what? It's back to the drawing board. The signers of the Constitution say, okay, fine. 1787, they go back to the drawing board and they create or they discuss the Bill of Rights, which is for the public, right? And this is how it came to be. They do that in 1789. They finally complete the Bill of Rights. So when you think of the Constitution, actually, when you think of our Constitution, it's really two documents together because they wouldn't sign the Constitution without the Bill of Rights. They're two separate documents, but it got ratified. The Constitution got ratified in 1791, 2 years after the Bill of Rights, because it had to go around the states and get signed. So in 1791, we actually signed the Constitution of the United States because it included the Bill of Rights. And now let me explain what they put into the Bill of Rights. This is how we got to the rights we have. Next slide, please. So this is 1787. They're now talking about the Bill of Rights. It was signed in 1789. All right, this is Amendment 1. This is the original, most probably coveted and wanted and spoken about amendment, which is our religion of right, religion of speech, religion of religion, religion of press. These are the main rights that number one. Number one amendment in the Bill of Rights is we have these rights. You cannot take them away from us. We can have our own religion. We can have our own expression. We can have our own assembly. We're allowed to have a free press, which means we could speak about what's going on and say we like it or we don't. There's a freedom, I said assembly. And we can petition the government, which is the freedom of protest. That's what we have protests. So this is number one. And by the way, freedom of assembly, just so you know, if you have purple hair, I'm making this up. If you have purple hair, and or let's say there's a group that only allows people with purple hair, and you have dark hair or blonde hair, whatever, you don't have purple hair, and you want to join that group, and they say, no, sorry, we only let people with purple hair. That is not discrimination, okay? They're allowed to have assembly of people with purple hair. You do not always have to be accepted in every group, nor do you have to accept other people into your group. The only time it becomes discrimination is when you stop, if the purple hair people stopped you with the dark hair from ever belonging to any group. You tell every group, they're not allowed to belong anyplace. That's where it becomes discrimination. All right. So you not being a part of a group is not discriminatory, but you being prevented from being in your own freedom is discrimination. That's the distinction, just so you know, because a lot of people don't even realize that yo, I can't get into this group. They're discriminating. No, it's not discrimination. If they don't want you in the group, they don't have to. They can have people of their own kind if they want their own kind. That's allowed. They just can't prevent you from going someplace else. All right, let's go to this is the big one. Amendment 1, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. Next slide. This is Amendment 2 and 3, all right? I'm going to touch on them generally. This is the Second Amendment, the famous Second Amendment of the right to bear arms. This was after the Revolution, you know, remember. They're now talking about freedom for the people. Everybody, this is 1780s, folks. Everybody had a gun. 1780s and 90s, they all had guns, right? They're coming out of a revolution, for Pete's sake. So everybody has a gun. They're not keeping people from having guns. What they're saying here is that if the Constitution doesn't last, if somebody does try to take over this Constitution or take over as a dictator, we want to be able to take them back, you know, have another insurrection. You can't take away our guns. We want our guns because if something doesn't work on our Constitution, I want to be able to have another revolution. That's how the Second Amendment started. You're not supposed to have guns to kill off your neighbor. We didn't set it up to you can have guns to kill your neighbor. It's guns to come against the government. You're the people. You're allowed to come against the government. And how can you do that unless you have some kind of weapons or some kind of arms, right? That was the reason for the Second Amendment. Amendment 3 is nobody can enter your house because the British used to do that. They would come into your house and decide to take over and without your consent. They never wanted that to happen again. So nobody from the government, nobody who works for the government can ever come into my private home without my consent. That was Amendment 3, all right? Next slide. Amendment 4 is another famous one. This is the one of search and seizure. Most people in the criminal world, on the legal world of the criminal world, know this one because you cannot go into, it's the same thing similar to Amendment 3. This is, you cannot be arrested. You cannot go to anybody's house to arrest them unless you have a warrant or unless you're invited in or unless there's some probable cause for you to barge in. For instance, probable cause. Let's say you're being, somebody just burglarized or robbed somebody and the police are in pursuit. If you went into a house, and they don't know whose house is it, but you went into a house, they can go into that house right after you. They do not have to be stopped at the door. They're in pursuit. That is allowed under the exception of the Bill of Rights. But let's say they're chasing this perpetrator and he evades them or disappears. And about 2 or 3 hours later, the cops find out, oh, he's in that house. They cannot go into that house. If there's any stoppage in the chase, they're not allowed to go into the house. Now you have to get a warrant. Now you have to get permission. It has to be a reason. It's against the government from ever coming into your private home without some criminal reason for them to come after you. Otherwise, they're not allowed to do it. So that is the exception. This is the search and seizure one, which protects people in their homes. If they extended it to churches now, you can't chase somebody in. Well, you could chase them. You can't go into a church. You can't go into an organization or an office. None of that is allowed. You can't barge into anybody's private private surroundings unless they want you to, without their consent. That's Amendment 4. Next slide. Amendment 5. All right, this is another famous one, which is the Fifth Amendment. They take the Fifth. This was to stop people from indicting themselves, and criminalize themselves. So when people take the Fifth, I refuse to answer on the grounds that I, might be charged with a crime. That's what the Fifth Amendment is. You cannot self-incriminate yourself. And people were forced to do that back then. They had to, even though they should not have said anything against their own well-being. You can't say, yeah, I did it. You don't ever have to say you did it. Nobody can force you to say that. In the days of the monarchy, they were forced to do that. You can't do that under our Constitution. Nobody can ever be forced to incriminate themselves. And so you can never testify against yourself. That's pretty much what Amendment 5 is all about. And usually it's used in criminal cases. Let's go to the next one. This is a general thing. There are 10 of them. There are 10 Bill of Rights. 6 is, this is a speedy trial. So if you are arrested, people used to keep you in jail. They never, it still goes on in some countries. They put you in jail and you never have a trial. You're just incarcerated forever. You can't do that in this country. You have to have a trial within a period of time. So Amendment 6 says you cannot arrest people without having a trial that comes up in a reasonable time. That's Amendment 6, pretty much. I'm paraphrasing and what's the word? Summarizing. So, but let's go to the next one. Amendment 7. Amendment 7. This is where you cannot arrest people because they don't have money. This is all about bail, pretty much. They used to arrest people, or they say, unless you have $100, so we're putting you in jail. You can't do that in our Constitution. There has to be a reason to have bail. Nowadays, they don't even want to have bail because they don't want to keep people in jail at all for the money. So they say, unless they really think you're not going to appear, bail is to keep people from not appearing, keep people from disappearing. And so they'll put you in jail if they think you're going to flee the country, for instance. But in those days, bail was put in just to put you in jail. There was a fee to keep yourself out of jail. That can no longer be done. All right, Amendment 8 is this, which is, this is a jury trial. So everybody's allowed to have a jury trial, which they didn't have under monarchies and dictatorships. There was no people listening in on your case. The monarch was doing it. The king was doing it. The dictator was doing it. You have a right to have a trial by jury of your peers, or a judge. It's up to your choice. But you have a right to have a trial by jury, which means people can listen in on your case and listen to your case. That's Amendment 7. Amendment 8. Next slide. This is 8, 9, and 10. We put them all together. This was also excessive bail. That was another part of the bail. It goes along with the bail of not having to buy yourself out of jail. This is the last two, 9 and 10, pretty much mirror each other. Anything that's not mentioned in this Bill of Rights, Amendment 10 particularly says that, but anything that's not mentioned, the states can give to you, or it doesn't mean that you don't have this right. You can bring it up anyway. Even if we don't mention it, you still have certain rights that you are entitled to, and you can bring that up. It gave you an opening, you as a person, a citizen of the country. It gave you an opening to say, well, it may not be written down, but I think this is a personal right. I should have this. And that was like a blanket overview of you having that privilege. And this, next slide, this was the Bill of Rights. That was the combination of 1789, that was completed. 1791, the states actually said, okay, we will agree with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights together, and that's why they're considered together more or less with our Constitution. But it was the signing of the Constitution that actually happened in 1791. And that brings us to the end of this. I don't know if I'm within my time frame. I hope I'm within my time frame. But this is to give you an idea of who you are. It is all about the people. This Constitution of the United States is all about the people. Nobody else but us, the people, can change anything in the government, There is no leading authority except us. We are the government. We are the leading authority. And that is something that the United States citizenry should be aware of. And I know it's not easy. I didn't say this was going to be easy because people are afraid and they don't want to put their necks out or whatever your reason is perfectly okay. Don't be embarrassed and don't be shamed by it. You just have to know that it's you or nobody. And if you want to be in an organization, do it, you do it. And if you don't, you don't. And that is the essence of the United States of America. I don't know what else to say after that. I do appreciate you listening to this. I hope you take it under consideration. It's very important that you know who you are. Knowledge is power, as we say. Knowledge is power. And I think that brings us to the close. Thank you very much. And I think we're going to sign off now.